influence things in nearly every country in Western Europe. Many times he went head-to-head with the local rulers. He had at one point excommunicated, put under interdict, or was on very bad terms simultaneously with the King of England, the King of France, the Holy Roman Emperor. So the big three at the time, all three of them were at odds with him, and he didn't flinch. And he not only took on the powers of the state, but of clerical reform, religious reform, looking at, again, that growing Catharist heresy, and the new problem of the defeats of the Crusades in the Holy Land. So by this period, many of those territories that the Crusaders had taken over and established their kingdoms 100 years before, the Muslim authorities had regained their strength and taken back. So many of those lands, those kingdoms, didn't survive the century. Pope Innocent III sought to tackle all of the problems facing the church: clerical scandals, misadministration of the sacraments, poor preaching, lack of knowledge of the faith, financial abuses of all kinds, relations between the abbots and bishops, continued encroachment on the church by the princes of Europe. In Pope Innocent III's papacy marked the high point of papal influence in worldly affairs and prestige. For various reasons, this would steadily decline during the 13, 14, and 1500s. So almost an uninterrupted. Getting in the 1300s, the influence, moral influence, and then when you get into the 1500s, increasingly political influence as well. But in the early 1200s, a great deal of influence because of the usually good moral character of popes for many generations at this point. So the Albigensian heresy. Returning to the point made, or the question made a little bit earlier, how did this perpetuate itself? Now, the Albigensian heresy is named after a town, or Albigensians are named after a town in southern France called Albi, where this heresy was particularly strong, particularly centered. If you look on the map here, this map encompasses northern Spain, Catalan region, Catalonia, and southern France. So that's where these colors all flow one into the next. That's the region of Europe we're looking at. And that pink region in the middle is where the Catharist or Albigensian heresy was most heavily centered, and where it had its deepest roots, and was most successful in promoting itself. In that area is where we find the town of Toulouse, or the city of Toulouse in southern France, Carcassonne, and this is the area where the Dominicans will have their foundation. This is where St. Dominic establishes the order of friars preachers, in that pink area in southern France there. That whole region in southern France has the name Languedoc region, and that is where this heresy began spread. Now the Catharist stands for the pure ones, those who are pure. And Albigensian comes from the name of the town. And that heresy that St. Augustine had toyed with before he became a Catholic in his late 20s was gradually in the 400s, 500s became a very minor thing in the fringes of the Byzantine Empire. It basically disappeared in the West. And then as the history of Byzantium progresses, they appear under different names a couple times more. There was the Paulicians that appear, but it's the same underlying problem. New name, same problem of this division between spiritual good, material evil, and the rejection of all the sacraments because they involve material matter, right? The rejection of the incarnation, the rejection of the belief in the resurrection. So the Paulicians are one group. They're primarily around Armenia. And then in the 10th century, They appear again in what's Bulgaria, and they now have the name the Bogomils. And in the 1100s, they begin to appear in southern France. So did they come over here through trade once after the First Crusade, a greater flow of people and money, or is it something the First Crusaders brought back? Not really sure exactly how they started, how they got their roots in southern France, but it's at that same time that they start to grow. The heresy gradually moved westward, and there's evidence of its existence around Toulouse by the year 1119. It flourished in the Languedoc region and in northern Italy, and its errors had been condemned at Lateran II. There was a particular preacher of that sort by the name of Peter Bruys, who had been condemned, and again at Lateran III. But there was no organized effort at re-evangelization of the area. There was no, other than decreeing these things and expecting the local prince or lord to somehow bring it about. Or maybe the local bishop, leave it up to the local bishop to figure out how to make these things happen. They were very ineffective. And one of the, just looking at some of their, a bit more at some of their beliefs and the consequence, or what their beliefs resulted in, there was the rejection of the humanity of Christ. So if God is viewed as good and entirely having nothing to do with the material world, that's the work of an evil God or a lesser God or something like that, then Christ cannot be our Savior and really be a human being, really have a body. Otherwise, you're contaminating what is pure. So the rejection of the humanity of Christ, the rejection of the incarnation, the rejection of the entire sacramental system, especially the Eucharist, because that's the reception of the glorified body and blood of our risen Lord. And, well, what does that have to do with a system that denies the goodness of creation, right? So these things are entirely rejected. Likewise, if you're rejecting the goodness of creation, you are necessarily rejecting marriage, right? The goodness of marriage is rejected. The goodness of childbearing is rejected. So one of the consequences for southern France is that that this new system, this Albigensian religion, divided itself into two parts. There were the believers, the masses, most of those who followed the Catharist or Albigensian heresy, and then there were the perfect, those who strove to live out the full consequences of these beliefs. And the masses, or the believers, were basically what you do with your body is not important. It has no consequences on your soul, because you are the separation of body and soul, right? Ultimately, on your deathbed, you will receive this hopefully the sacrament, the one type of sacrament the Albigensians held, and you will be freed from this material body. So what you do with that body here and now is not all that important, but you should stay away from anything that perpetuates the trapping of souls in the material world. So if those who were not ready to become part of the perfect were encouraged to take up homosexual practices or even bestiality, because this didn't perpetuate the trapping of souls within matter. It's starting to sound familiar, like a world we live in. So that children would not result. So children were seen as a graver evil than the promotion of these deviant practices. Houses of prostitution were encouraged for those who couldn't abide by these first recommendations. So, and the worst was to have a family with children. So that's the bottom of the rung. That's not really acceptable in the Albigensian view of things. There were the sect had one sacrament, in that